As you can see, we're right where you left us after Volume 1. Hey, welcome back. This is the second in our 4-volume set. And this room is again going to fill with the superstars of the golden age of country music. I sure hope you enjoyed Volume 1. If you enjoyed it as much as I did, get ready to laugh along with us in Volume 2. If the stories about Minnie Pearl and Roger Miller had you rolling on the floor, just wait till you get a load of Grandpa Jones and Roy Acuff stories. Del Reeves does an impression of Roy Acuff that is absolutely... Well, never mind. You're about to see it all for yourself. I will tell you this. The story of Charley Pride's first appearance on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry is fact. I'm not going to spoil it for you. But if you will allow me a brief remembrance of my own. I remember when I was doing mornings at WSM, the morning that Roy Acuff passed away. We were prepared for his passing. We knew that that was probably imminent. That morning when I hit the radio station and they said Roy had passed away, I said, let's do this. There's time to grieve and to mourn his passing, and there's time for that. It's appropriate. But this morning, let's celebrate his life. And if we're talking about Minnie, or we're talking about Marty Robbins, or Patsy Cline, or Farron Young, or Mama Mae Axton, we're going to celebrate their life. We've all had a time to mourn their death. And we know that that lies in front of all of us. So, hey, you know, it's an accepted thing. But let's celebrate the life of the people. And that morning, Bill Anderson started off the telephone conversation. He called me and he said, I remember the last time I was on stage with Mr. Acuff. And Bill, would you tell that story?
I was telling about the time that, of course, Roy and I had the song, you know, I Wonder If God Likes Country Music, which was a pretty serious song. And Roy had come out on the stage, and as we all know, he was pretty feeble and pretty sick in his last days, and it was really very sad the way that the song came off. But then it was so great to see that Roy Acuff never lost his sense of humor, because at the end of the song, I think the audience really sensed that something special was going on. And at the end of the song, they stood up, and I went over and put my arm around Mr. Roy, as thin and frail and all as he was, and I leaned over. Of course, you know, he didn't see real well in his later years. And I said, Mr. Roy, they're standing up. And he looked at me. He said, they ain't going home, are they? We got a guy over here that... Oz, how many years did you work with Roy Acuff?
54.
How many?
54.
54 years.
Wow. Got a
Wow.
steady job, didn't
What do you remember about Roy Acuff? When people ask you today to talk about Roy, what stands out in your mind the most?
I'll tell you one thing that's happened. It was in Pennsylvania, at Sunset Park in Pennsylvania. Robert Lund, everybody knows Robert Lund, don't you?
Yeah.
He was with us. We pulled up in the park, and Roy was asleep when we pulled in the park. And Robert Lund got out and asked everybody for a dime to see Roy Acuff sleep.
Well, now, see, these guys that travel in these buses today, so they couldn't do it because y'all were in the car, right?
Yeah.
How much money did he make?
I don't know. We're all up laughing and we don't know what he made.
You got your dobro over there. I think we need to hear a little bit of the Great Speckled Bird. Can you do that? Well, we liable to all join in and start singing.
Yeah, you can do it.
You with that?
to stay, 'cause it's not any. That's all I know the song has.
Anybody else know anymore? Kitty, you know some of the words? Kitty will jump in and start singing, "It wasn't God who made honky-tonk angels," because it's the same melody.
Roy went out in the green room, we call it there. You know, they got the padded seats and everything. He brought one of those chairs in and put it in his dressing room. And he called it the Johnny Russell chair. And whenever I came in, if somebody was sitting in that chair, he asked them to get up. The only person he wouldn't ask to get up was my mother. And I said, "Well, Roy, she's sitting in my seat." He said, "Well, you ask her." But then one night I came in and he had his chair and he was facing this guy and they were really in conversation. And I went over and I stood by Roy and I went, and the man was sitting in my chair. And Roy looked at me and he wouldn't say nothing. And I said, "Roy," and he looked at me and he still wouldn't say anything. Finally, the man said something about he felt like something was happening that he was involved in, but he didn't know what it was. And so Roy finally said, "Well, to tell you the truth, that's the Johnny Russell chair, and when he comes in, everybody who's sitting in it, we ask him to get up so he can have a place to sit down." So he said, "Well, let me get up. I don't want to break tradition." And he got up, and I sat down in the chair. And when he left, when he walked out of the room, Acuff looked at me and he said, "You realize he owns every chair in here?" It was Mr. Gaylord.
That's your spot.
He thought it was funny, and he got a kick out of it.
Hey, I got to tell one. When Hank Williams Jr. was doing the outlaw movement at the very peak of the outlaw movement, and Hank was invited to sing on the Grand Ole Opry, and Roy said, "I want to introduce him." I've known him as a little boy. So Hank got excited, called Manuel in Hollywood, and had one of those dusters from this, right from the outlaw movie. You know, boy, he was a beautiful duster, all trimmed up nice, and had a nice velvet collar and real long. And so Roy looked at him on the stage. He said, "Now, friends, here's a little rascal that I helped raise. Tonight he's appearing with long hair and a nice little raincoat." Hank Williams Jr.
Well, he was introducing me one night, and he said, "Here he is," and he told them where I was from, told them about my records, and he said, "Now here he is, Johnny, somebody said Russell," and he said, "Oh yeah, Johnny Russell." I came out and he said, "Johnny," said, "I want to apologize for not being able to remember your name." I said, "Well, that's okay, Mr. Snow, that didn't bother me." And from then on, we were buddies.
You know, Bill, one time, he and Herman Crook, you know, would be on the stage a lot of times together there, you know. And Herman would walk out, and Roy said, Herman said, "Did you ever drink?" Said, "No, never did drink." Said, "Well," said, "Did you ever go out with any other women?" And he said, "No." Roy said, "You don't know what you missed."
Bill, I think probably Osmond can tell you more about this, but I was along on the trip. Every time Roy would go into a restroom at a truck stop somewhere, one of the boys would slip a note under the door and say, "God is watching you." So Acuff didn't know, of course, the boys were doing it. And they went to the truck stop, and one of them slipped a note under the door and said, "God is watching you." And Roy had just about all he could take. So the guys had done left the restroom. He come out, and this big old burly truck driver sitting there, and he slapped him on the shoulder and said, "I know God's watching me."
Gene, keep the microphone. Keep the mic. I was going to get Gene to sing a little bit of the Wabash Cannonball, because you always do that.
See, I thought it.
Everybody, we'll all sing.
From the great Atlantic Ocean to the wide Pacific shore, from the Pinot flowing mountains to the south down by the shore. She's mighty tall and handsome and known quite well by all. She's a combination called the Wabash Cannonball. She came down from Birmingham rode into the station, you'd hear all the people say, there's a gal from Tennessee, she's long and she's tall. She came down from Birmingham on the Wabash Cannonball. Yodelay-o, yodelay-o, yodelay-o. He never did yodel.
I think Joe Alice is going to tell us something.
As some of you might know, my mentor and the guy who started me and trained me and I learned to love was Tex Ritter. Yeah. And Tex, I traveled with him all over the country. And one time I was a disc jockey here. Tex was on the road and he called me. I must preface this by saying he had a manager named Irving Yates, and he had hung a phrase on Tex that Tex hated. He called him America's most beloved cowboy. And Tex hated that phrase. In fact, when we get mad at Tex, we'd call him beloved on the road. You know? So he called and said, I've got some more dates. He said, I'm sick. I don't know what to do. I've got flu, pneumonia. I don't know what it is. So he said, do something for me. He said, I'll be in there tomorrow. So we called out to Vanderbilt. And when he got in, we took him out there. And they said, yeah, we'll do something for him. And so they put him in this little vestibule with a curtain across. And this little Oriental doctor came in. Mr. Tex? He said, yeah. I said, what are you going to do for me? He said, drop your pants, please. Well, Tex didn't even take off his costume. Now, he had his hat with the hair out from under the hat, a cigarette with the ashes out to about there, big, thick horn-rimmed glasses, and he dropped his pants, and they caught on the tops of his boots, and they were just hanging over the edge. So he dropped his shorts, and they hung there, too. Then he just reached down and got his coat, and he pulled it up like this, and there he stood. Now, get that picture. And this little Oriental doctor down behind him was fixing his syringe, his needle, and like this, and just about to give him his shot, and Tex turned around, pulled himself up fully, and he says, young man, are you aware that you're about to insert the needle into the derriere of America's most beloved cowboy?
In 1965 or 66, we'd played a show and up in Kentucky, and was on our way home, and that was the first time that Charlie Pride was going to be on stage at the Opry, and Mr. Acuff was going to announce him. And more likely, what the people of Marcia Victor had went to Roy and say, at that time, he had a top 10 record with anybody knowing Charlie Pride was a black man. You know.
Snakes crawling night.
Yeah, it was Snakes Crawling Night. And so the R.C. Victor people told, I guess, Acuff, don't say anything about Charlie being black, okay? Well, it's just a fact. Knowing him, he probably started thinking. And so when he got out there, well, this is the way he did that night, and Big Jim Webb had to stop the bus because he couldn't drive it no longer. He started laughing so hard. And Roy's always said, thank you. Bless your hearts, children. We're glad to have you here tonight. We got a wonderful person coming out here. He's made his mark in country music, and just because he's a boy that that comes from the great state of Mississippi, and he's a wonderful person. They tell me he's an awful good boy, but just because he's a boy that, well, he's made his mark in country music, and he's a wonderful person. Well, let me say this about the kid. You can't judge a good book by its cover. Come on here, Charlie Pride.
What did Mr. Acuff say? You would imitate him to his face, wouldn't you? I mean,
well, you know, a lot of times when I go out there, he'd say to me, he said, who are you going to impersonate tonight? And I'd tell him, he said, no, you ain't. You're going to do me. And he pulled up a chair and sat right in front. He said, now let me see what you can do. And then that night I did I tell the people that he was going to go rock and roll. I did that, you ain't nothing but a hound dog in waltz time. You know? And just knocked him out. He just sat there and looked at you, and the people just absolutely going wild. And when you got through, he said, well, he's not bad. That all the time. Yeah, waltz time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Never caught a rabbit, and you ain't no friend of mine.
Give us a laugh, Jeannie C. Riley said you said you had a serious story about Mr. Acuff.
Yeah, it was just a great bit of advice he gave me one time at the Grand Ole Opry. I was never blessed to be a regular member of the Opry, but I did get to do a number of guest shots on there. And of course, I always noticed each time I did Harper Valley PTA, I went over better than any other song that I did. And this particular night, I'd been out there a little more often. I thought, well, I can do 2 other songs, you know, leave Harper Valley out. I did, and it didn't go over so well. You know, they gave me a mild applause. And out in the parking lot that night, and I did not know Roy Acuff personally, but he stopped me and gave me a bit of advice that worked from there on out. He told me, he said, the folks know you by Harper Valley PTA. If you come out and do that first, they'll listen to anything else you want to give them afterwards. And I found out that every time when I went to the Opry after that, if I did Harper Valley and did something else second, it went over the way it was supposed to go over. And I really appreciate that advice from a man that didn't really know me personally, and I didn't know him, but he helped me out with that little bit of advice.
Does that mean I got to start opening with the Purple People Eater?
Let me tell you a serious one. I came here in 54, or 55, somewhere in there. In those days, if you went to work for WSM, you had to be there a year before you could get a commercial. You could read some public service announcements, but no commercial. So about 3 months, we had rented a place, and we're looking for a place by then because they decided to put me on the Opry. I think Louis Buck left, and they decided to put me on the Opry with a couple of commercials, Martha White and so forth. And we were looking at houses to buy, and we'd sold our place in Shreveport before coming here, and we found a place that was just gorgeous, beautiful log house. 10-room log house on Brush Hill Road. Well, we'd seen several other houses, but my family fell in love with that. Wife and 5 kids, just fine for us. But my wife and I said we couldn't afford that. And the man told us, as well as I remember, the man told us that this was Roy Acuff's house. And he used to bring money home in a tow sack and throw it under the bed until Monday morning so he could go to the bank. That's what he told us. But that Saturday night, and I was scared to death anyway, a new announcer on the Grand Ole Opry, and Roy came up, Mr. Acuff. And he said, T. Tommy, we're glad to have you here. Thank you, sir. He said, understand you like our house. I said, oh, yes, sir, it's beautiful. Had 2 acres with it. And it was out in Inglewood, and he said, well, are you going to buy it? I said, no, sir, we can't afford it, Mr. Acuff. Why? I said, well, we sold our place in Shreveport, and I cleared $1,000, and that's all I have to pay down on the house. He said, well, he said, I'll take a second mortgage. Could you pay closing costs? And I said, yes, sir, I guess I could. About $250. He said, well, meet me at the bank Monday morning. And we did, and moved into the house. Y'all excuse me a minute. We got the house, and the deal was we were going to pay $100 a month on the second mortgage. Well, Vicky sent $100 the first month. Mildred called and said, See, Tommy, don't send us any more money. And she sent it back. We'll let you know when. And Vicky every month would put $100 aside. That was going to be for the second mortgage. When they decided, Roy and Mildred, to take some money. 6 years went by. And one Saturday night, of course, I was doing good then, you know, money-wise. And he said, T, I could use a little of that money if you could spare it. We're redoing the Dunbar Caves. And he said, I need a little extra cash. And I said, well, how much is it? He said, well, wasn't it $6,000? I said, yes, sir. I said, how much of it do you want? He said, well, anything you can spare. I said, I can pay it all, Roy. By the time it was Roy, no longer Mr. Acuff. We'd been there 6 years. And he said, well, it was $6,000, wasn't it? I said, yes, sir. Plus whatever the interest is. He said, no interest.
Speaking of his house, did y'all ever hear about the time he was out mowing his lawn, and the lady pulled up, and she didn't recognize him, didn't know who Roy Acuff was, and she rolled down the window, and she motioned for him to come over, said, young man, how much do you get for mowing lawns? And Roy said, well, the lady in this house lets me sleep with her every night. She rolled up the window and took off.
Bill, I remember you, toward the last, you know, it seemed like Mr. Acuff had lost so much of his eyesight, and he would basically tell you he was just got blind, you know. And there was a real pretty blonde-haired girl that walked by his dressing room. Were you in there that night, Johnny Russell?
Yeah.
And do you remember?
He could see that all right.
Not just the girl. He saw her ankle bracelet on her ankle as she walked by.
He told me one time, I hadn't joined the Opry at the time, but he would put me on his show. I wouldn't be scheduled, but he would put me on his show. And he told me one night, he said, you know, they can't schedule you because sometimes because they don't have room, but I'll put you on my show. You just come out here ready to go on the show, and I'll put you on. And I said, well, Roy, because I was wanting to be a member, and I didn't want to do anything wrong. I said, well, what if it makes them mad? And he just kind of leaned back, closed his eyes, and he said, no, we ain't going to worry about that. So I went to Hal Durham, and I told Hal what Mr. Acuff said. And I said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to make you mad. I don't want to make him mad. So I don't know what to do. And Hal looked at me and said, well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what I'm going to do if Roy Acuff calls me out on stage. And I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going.
Going.
So I suggest that if he calls you out, go out. But he said, now, you know when we're full, and if you would, I'd appreciate it if you'd be hard to find. So a couple of times I went out and stood out in the audience, and Roy would introduce me, and I was out there, and I couldn't come back. But that's just the way he was. He wanted to help you, and he wanted to do things. Well, I would say he's probably the biggest one reason I'm a member of the Opry, because Hal said he would come in the office, and he wouldn't say you should make Johnny Russell a member. He would open the door and look in, and he'd say, you're making a mistake, and then leave. And Hal finally stopped him one day and said, what do you mean I'm making a mistake? He said, if you don't make Johnny Russell a member, you're making a mistake. It wasn't that he was telling him what to do, he was just telling him what he wasn't doing right.
Years ago, at the old disc jockey convention, that was before, everybody in here groaned when I said that. I'm glad they blew the Andrew Jackson Hotel up. If it could talk, there'd be none of us here today. But I had just written a song by Jim Reeves that had sold several million records called He'll Have to Go. And I came down to that convention. I was doing pretty good that year. So as you'll remember, they had the different record companies on different floors were throwing parties for the disc jockeys. And you'd go to this one, and then you'd go up to that one, and you'd try that one for a while. And every place I went, I noticed there was this heavy-set guy was behind me, and I'd turn around, he'd look at me and wave and say, "Thank you," and I'd go on. And so I went up on the next floor, and look, here's the same guy behind me. And I'd look, and he'd say, "Thank you," and he'd go on, and I'd go to the next floor and down. It's just roaming around. But every place I went, I'd look, and here's this guy like he's tailing me. And he'd say, "Thank you." It's beginning to get on my nerves. What in the world is going on here? So I looked. So I said, I've got to get to the bottom of this. So I'm walking down the hall. I look, and there he is behind me. So I went around the corner and stopped like this, I guess like 007 or something. And when this guy came around the thing, I grabbed him. And I pushed him up against the wall, and I said, "Who in the heck are you, and what do you want?" He said, "My name is Johnny Russell, and I wrote the back side of He'll Have to Go."
Any of you remember, any of you work a lot with Sonny James or ever work with Sonny? I loved him so much, and he was such a gentleman, and his whole band was such a gentleman. And we were doing 4 or 5 days, and I don't remember exactly where it was, but I went into my dressing room, and I getting all dressed for the performance, and I had my bottom to the little tuxedo I was wearing, but I had nothing on at the top, thinking I had my door locked. Pretty soon 2 guys comes in, and it's from the band, and I went, "Oh no," and they went, "Oh no." Closed the door. I was so totally embarrassed, and so were they. Nothing was said. The next day, I received this great, big, gorgeous bouquet of flowers. And it was from them, the Southern gentlemen. But you know, I never really quite understood why I got the flowers, whether they were so disappointed in what they saw, or if they felt sorry for me. But I actually think it's because they were true gentlemen. Great people.
Jan, I know what Jan Howard's thinking. You've got to tell what happened when Jimmy Gately walked in on you that time.
Oh, gosh. Jimmy Gately was always the sweetest guy in the world, but his mind, he was always in another world. He was floating around somewhere. And we were on the bus, and everybody, or I had my own little room, Bill had his, and the guys had all their bunks and everything. But I had my curtain pulled and was getting dressed for the show that afternoon or night. And anyway, I just had on a blouse and pantyhose. I mean, nothing else. I mean, whatever. And yeah, it's okay. But I wasn't dressed. Well, the curtain flew open, and Jimmy Gately says, "Jan, is this tie all right?" I'm standing there with nothing on below the blouse but pantyhose, and I said, "Yeah, Gate. The tie is straight, but your head is crooked." And I pulled the curtain back, and he said, "Thanks," you know, and just didn't acknowledge anything. "Thanks." And then I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, that's an insult. So I pulled the curtain back open, and I said, "Gates, do you realize that I'm standing here in a blouse and a pair of pantyhose, and you ask if your tie's straight? You didn't even notice." And he said, "Really? Let me look again." But I have a funny story about Bill Carlisle. Out of the opera. Margot was talking about people walking in on her. One afternoon, Hee Haw had the makeup room where we all dress, you know. And so they assigned me to dressing room 3. And I didn't realize that Bill Carlisle always used dressing room 3. But anyway, I was in there, and in the makeup room, nobody locks the door because there's nobody in there but women. And I was getting dressed, and all I had on was pantyhose and a bra, literally. And I was changing clothes. And the door was open, and there was Bill Carlisle. And I said, "Oh, no, Bill." I mean, I was grabbing for this and that. "No, Bill, no." And he just said, and he just kept walking in. I said, "No, out, out." And he turned around, and he finally, but he backed out. He did not. And, well, anyway, I went over and closed the door, and then I got tickled. And later I saw him in the hallway, and he said, "I would say I'm sorry, but I'm not."
we have a rare opportunity here today, and I'm surprised somebody hadn't done this sooner, because we have the man present who can confirm or deny a Grandpa Jones story.
Uh-oh.
And so far, nobody's told one.
Yeah.
But, oh, you could write a book. But I want to tell one and have Grandpa tell if this is right or not. Because this is the way I heard it. That he had a dog that was getting out and chasing his chickens, and one of them was a chicken killing dog. And so he didn't want that, of course. And he was standing there talking to somebody till he noticed this dog got out from under the fence. It was a hole that was under the fence. And he got out and started chasing down this chicken, and Grandpa caught him. And he got a stick and just whipped that dog good and threw him back over the fence. And they said, well, Grandpa, he'll just get out again with that hold. He says, not till the swelling goes down.
All right, is that a true story?
Hey, I got what it's true, John. This is what he done to me. I wanted him to go with me one morning to a Sunday school. The teacher said, bring one of your best friends. I called him. I said, Grandpa, you're my friend? He said, yeah. I said, will you do me a favor? He said, why, sure. And I said, how about going to Sunday school with me? He said, I just sat there and couldn't hear him. And I said, I'll tell him. Don't bother you. All you'll have to do is just sit there and listen. And he said, well, I thought, boy, I've got him now. You know. I said, just this one time. He said, well, no, I won't go. I said, I guess I can take that as a no.
You just well tell them about the cow that is in the...
Yeah, hey.
Tell us about it, Grandpa. Tell us about the cow.
You tell her.
Yeah.
Okay.
You tell her.
Okay, thank you.
Well, go ahead.
When I got these cattle, and one of them...
What cattle?
Cattle. What cattle?
It wasn't me. It was him.
And so... Huh?
The white one.
Yeah, the white. anyhow, one of them... Let me talk. One of them...
What were you going to be? What was you working in being?
Cattle bear.
Cattle bear. Okay. Now can I talk?
Yeah.
Okay. And one of them, I had him, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, and one of them disappeared. A good cow. And I didn't know where. I hunted all over the farm for him. And
Ramona had to go with you, too.
yeah, Ramona went with me, and we walked all over that place and couldn't find that cow. And I called him, and I said, I lost a cow. And he said, well, I'll come over in the morning and help you find her. So I called him that night, and I said, Bill, you don't have to come over. I said, I found my cow. And he said, where was she? And I said, in the ice box. I'd forgotten it, you know. I played a lot of dates in West Virginia. Fine folks down there to pick for. I bet Johnny has too. Yeah, and I remember one time I had a fellow by the name of Lenny Aylshire. Does anybody know?
I know Lenny Aylshire. One-fingered fisher.
Well, Lenny was a fine dancer and a fiddle player. Had one finger. He said he lost a fight with not a chainsaw. They wasn't happening then, but a circular saw.
Yeah.
And and he'd play all over that fiddle with that one thumb and that finger. And you know how back years ago, Johnny knows it, and he does. The bottom of your car or the floor would be just everything in there, just everything you could put in there. So Lenny was in the back seat, and we was driving along through one of them. Back then, the roads was awful crooked, and Lenny picked up one of these newspapers, old newspapers, and held it up and said, "Well, I see where Lincoln was assassinated."
I got to tell you another story about Grandpa and Lenny Ailshire. Grandpa told me this one. I thought that's where you was going a while ago with the Lincoln story. But said they'd been playing a date, and back then there wasn't nothing open the night after the show, but maybe the occasional little diner. And finally they came up to one of these little diners back there in the hills of West Virginia. They went in, and the short order cook was back there frying them hamburgers, and sweating and wiping himself. And they sat up at the counter. And finally he turned around and said, "What do you boys want?" And Lenny spoke up and said, "Give me a coconut and a hard-boiled egg, something you can't get your nasty ass."
Now, this is a Grandpa story. I don't know if it's true or not.
Don't you tell that.
Grandpa was fencing in his pasture out there in Goodlettsville.
True story.
And he had a winch, on the front of his Jeep to tighten the wire and everything. And he fenced his Jeep in.
With no gate.
With no gate. He said, he walked over and he kicked the tire real hard on that Jeep. He said, "If you could eat grass, I'd just leave you in here."
I think the true stories are the funniest by all means. But you live up Springfield, I think, when we was touring a lot, and you rode with me
No,
up in Canada.
I was as high as Springfield, but
No, you was building the new house because Ramona moved in it while we was gone. You remember that? Let me tell it my way. Anyhow, we've been on. It's just your house. What do you know? We've been on about a 20-day tour up in Canada and around, and Grandpa was riding with me. He just had one car at the time, and it was about time for school to open, and the new house was about ready. His nephew or somebody was building it, but he was still living in Springfield, and so he left his car there so Ramona could take the kids to school, and every day he'd call in and get a progress report, Finally, they moved in about halfway through the tour. So we finished up on a Friday night, normally that far away, 900 miles or so. We'd have stayed over till the next day, and Grandpa said, "If you ain't too tired," said, "why don't we start on back tonight?" Said, "If you get sleepy, I'll help you drive." So we drove straight through, got into his new place out there on Ridgetop it was after dark the next night. And beautiful house, his dream home, and all this stuff. Opened the door and walked in, and it smelled like 7 dozen rotten eggs. Grandpa said, "Ramona, what in the world is that?" She said, "Grandpa," her face was this long, said, "we've got sulfur water." Oh! He'd gone out there and drilled his well and struck water, but he didn't have a test. Built the house, and she'd just taken a shower. That old house smelled like crap. I never felt so sorry for a fella in my life.
Not me.
Didn't it smell like that, pal?
Yeah. No, thanks.
Yeah, you did. Anyhow, the continuation of this is they finally ate up so many filters that he drilled a well down at the foot of the hill. You remember this, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Was playing noontime neighbors at that time, and he drilled and drilled. Thought at the foot of the hill they'd get water pretty quick, see. But every day at noontime neighbors said, "Well, Grandpa, have you struck water yet?" This went on 4 or 5 days, and finally one, he said, "Grandpa, have you struck water yet?" He said, "No, but we smell rice a burning."
The story I heard was on like Friday Night Frolics, when it used to be done from the studios at WSM. Grandpa and Stoney Cooper had both come back to work that same night. Stoney had had a heart attack, and when he signed his program off, he said, I want to thank you neighbors for all the hundreds and hundreds of cards and letters that you sent me during my recent heart attack, and I sure do appreciate it, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. So Grandpa followed him on the air, and so at the end of his program, he says, well, I want to thank you for the dozens of letters that you sent me for my recent gallbladder operation. He said, you know, I reckon heart attacks just outdraw
After we had moved here, Paul, the new little disc jockey in town, he said, see, Tommy, I want you and your family to come over to the house for dinner Sunday. I said, yes, sir. We talked about, I think it'll be all right. He said, well, we're going to have some poke salad. I said, what? He said, some poke salad. We don't have that down home. He said, if you've never had any, he said, Romney cooks up some good poke salad. I'm going to feed you some. Okay. So we go over Sunday. And he has a son named Mark. Mark, by that time, is about 3 years old. And he talks just like Paul. So they had pulled down the stairs that go up, you know, those pull-down stairs you go upstairs. So little Mark, he's heading up the top, and Romney heard it. She said, Mark, are you up those stairs? And boom, 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 boom. Mark said, not now.
Johnny Paycheck, I had forgotten this. You played steel guitar in Grandpa Jones' band one time.
Well, he came up, well, back in those days, I played about anything, a little bit.
Got hungry.
He got us hungry, that's right.
That was Roger Miller.
Grandpa asked me one night, said, do you play anything? I said, because I was starving to death, he knew it. I said, well, I play, he said, I can play a few things. He said, well, what do you got handy? And I said, I can play, I'm playing a little steel right now. And he said, well, that's what I need. He said, I got about 4 or 5 days. You want to work them? I said, yeah. I didn't, you know, he needed steel guitar like he needed a whole head. You know what I mean? But he took me, and we went out, and I rode the camper with him and Ramona and Mark. And we worked a couple of days, and we stopped at this national park, state park. And we was going to spend the night there. And so we all got off, and we was all doing little chores. Just getting ready to cook up some hamburgers and stuff. I said, Grandpa, you want me to go get some firewood? And boy, he turned around and he said, now listen, you touch one stick of wood in here, and they'll have the militia on us. We was in a state park, you know. So I didn't touch one stick of wood.
I'd love to hear Paycheck sing.
Yeah. I think all of us would. Johnny Paycheck's one of everybody's favorite singers. Grab the guitar there.
Yeah, here's a good one.
There's it.
Just like one jacket
I don't know if it is, but it's a good one.
It's mine. It's Tim's when it came from the store.
What are we going to say?
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want to do.
That's not bad right there. I'm going to have your car and I'll get on.
You done played too much guitar.
Not a lot. I mean, but I use a capo real good already.
Would you rather have the steel?
No, thank you. Give me a B, boy. B. Y'all know, what do you want me to sing?
Some we can sing with you.
Take her, she's all I've got.
Oh, yeah.
Want to do the old violin? I can't recall One time in my life, I felt as lonely as I do tonight. I feel like I could lay down, get up no more. It's the damnedest feeling. I never felt it before. Tonight I feel like an old violin, soon to be put away, never played again. Don't ask me why I feel like this, I can't say. I only wish this feeling would just go away. But I guess it's 'cause the truth is the hardest thing I ever faced. 'Cause you can't change the truth in the slightest way. I tried. So I said, John, where do you go from here? Then like a fool, I turned around and I looked in the mirror. And there I was seeing an old violin, soon to be put away, never played again. Just like that hit me. Well, that old violin and I were just alike. We'd give her all the music, and soon we'll give our life.
Don't put the guitar down. I've heard you sing gospel songs, and I know you've got one that you want to sing. You say you got a paycheck story while he's doing that?
I hate to tell this, if he's going to do a gospel song, it doesn't exactly go hand in hand. Well, the thing is, I don't know if you'll remember this, Johnny.
I got one too.
You were playing the Taft Hotel in New York City, and I was privileged to be the girl singer on this particular tour. We'd been out to Nevada and worked our way in an automobile, all cramped up together, all the way to New York. And, you know, I thought show business wasn't as glamorous as it was cracked up to be that trip. But I was such a fan of Johnny Paycheck, so after I'd do my numbers, he'd be on the stage, however long he was. I wouldn't go to the restroom. I was afraid to miss a note. I was such a fan. But in those days, his manager was trying to keep him from drinking. Now, he straightened up from that this day and time. This particular night, he had so much to drink he was hiding from his manager, and he ended up in my room. I don't think you remember this, Johnny. That's why I asked you a while ago, should I tell about the Taft Hotel?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, you proceeded to lay down on my bed and you went to sleep. And I kept sitting up in this chair, and it got later and later, and I thought, I don't know how in the world I'm going to be able to sing tomorrow. You know, I was having a hard enough time as it was. I was so nervous being on that tour, and I was brand new in the business, trying to get in it. And finally, it just dawned on me, he'll never know if he's on top of the cover. If I get in on the other side and just pull the cover up, we'll be separated by the cover. So I got in and I slept for several hours with you, and I don't think you ever knew it, because I got up the next morning.
Now you tell me. There's a lot of things happened that way back then. When he found out that's the reason he quit drinking.
You know, Donnie, but John,
That's all right, you call me Donnie.
I know. Well, I can now. John's had, he's kind of like Furlong Husky. He's had several names in this business. Yeah. I didn't know he'd changed his name to Johnny Paycheck. I known him as Donnie Young for years.
I recorded him when he was Donnie Young.
Right.
Yeah.
We walked into played a show somewhere, and I said, "Hey, Donnie, how you doing?" He said, "Don't call me Donnie. My name's Johnny." And I said, "Excuse me." I said, "You are Donnie to me." He said, "Well, that's okay." He said, "You can call me that, but I don't want nobody else to."
Yes, she said, it always will be, she said.
Why'd you change your name?
Well, because the other one didn't work, I guess.
Sing us a song.
Let's see. Oh, yeah.
You mean, where'd you get that name? Is there? Aubrey Mayhew gave it to you, didn't he?
He was a heavyweight fighter, Johnny Paycheck.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Aubrey Mayhew was too.
Yeah.
He was a heavyweight fighter too.
We could say that, okay? Sure. What? Let's see. I don't know what. I don't know what I'm going to say to that. I got one here. If I can just find out where it's at. What I forget what key. On a hill. Yeah, let's try to see. Let's see. On a hill far away, sitting on rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophy at last I lay down. And I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Oh, that old rugged cross, so despised by the world, has a wondrous attraction for me. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to bear it in dark Calvary. In that cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down.
Why do you think it is?
Hey, Bill.
I'll ask Billy Walker. Why do you think it is when country singers get in a group together, before long they're singing gospel songs?
Well, I think probably it's because gospel is really the roots of country music. And two, there's something spiritual in country music that gospel put in there. You know, I was telling somebody the other day, you really realize the redeeming factor of country music. It's really got a redeeming moral to it. You take your cheating heart, and it says if you cheat, you're going to pay. It's just like Charlie's shoes. Well, I looked at this woman, like to be in Charlie's shoes. I looked at this woman and I said, boy, would I really like to have her. I really want this woman. And then the desire got so strong, well, he finally got a hold of this woman, and what he got hold of was troubles, sorrows, and heartaches. And so country music and gospel music are kind of hand in hand. One is talking about the spiritual side of living, and that's the gospel. Because, see, being a country music performer, and folks that like country music generally have a great feeling for the Lord. And that's where, when they sing gospel songs, that feeling of being close to our Redeemer is really prevalent. And then when we sing country music, we sing about situations, and we get lighthearted, and sometimes we get sad because there's sad situations in life, and that's really what country music is about. But in answer to your question, it's the closeness with our Redeemer when we sing gospel music. And you notice we all joined in, and we all knew the words, and we all loved what we were singing. And there was a couple of teary-eyed people, including me, when we start singing about the old rugged cross.
One of the greatest gospel singers in the world is sitting behind you. I remember, no, Kitty Wells, one of the greatest singers of any kind. But I remember one of the first albums that I ever had was called Singing on Sunday. You sang some terrific gospel. Gospel music's been a big part of your life, hasn't it, Kitty?
Yes, it has. I grew up singing gospel songs, and that's where I got started, really, singing gospel songs.
I bet you if we ask everybody in this room where they sang the first time in public, 90% of us would say in church. I imagine that.
I was at the zoo.
That's what, Skeeter?
At the zoo.
At the zoo.
That's true. I sung Pop Goes the Weasel at the zoo. No. I sung Pop Goes the Weasel, and they gave me money. Well, that's a good place to sing but as a small child, I mean, it's a time of honesty. And I was even thinking, too, with Johnny's song, I was home the other night. I had a lot of pain last Saturday night. I was home, and I watched him on TV doing that. And so I was thinking, is when he did the old work, So Like Life, you know, the old violin. And as I listened to all these stories and realized I've been here through all of the people that we've talked about and through all the times, and I've traveled with about everybody but Merle Kilgore, I think, but I've seen him in the wings lots of times. And so I think that's just great. And I think with that story and the old rugged cross and knowing Miss Kitty, and the thing that when I never copied her singing, but when I first met her, she was a Christian, and I became a Christian at 17. She's always been a role model to me from that side, not the wild side of life, but the Christian and the spiritual side of life. And I think I've always admired her so much for that, because when we'd be on the road, she and Sonny James, we all went to different churches. Now, Sonny and Kitty were both Church of Christ. I was Baptist. Now I'm a Baptist that stepped over the line. I'm Holy Ghost filled and Pentecostal, you know. But anyway, at that time, we'd always look for our different churches to go to. That was always the thing I admired about her. And I think that's it. The people that love country music are usually, first of all, the country people, the earthy people, and that are close to the Lord. But I found that in a lot of music, too, that, you know, the redeeming qualities, as Billy says, but singing about our Redeemer, you know, and the life, the old violin, our life, and then to think that we have eternal life as believers in the cross and Christ, that's just,
really special. I'm really happy to be a part of all this today.
We're glad to have you. Kitty, could you sing a gospel song for us? Yes, sir. I think everybody's kind of in that mood right now.
Does anybody, do you know Dust on the Bible?
Oh, yeah, my favorite.
Yeah. What key?
I think that's key.
The L's right.
Start out with Dust on the Bible, dust on the Holy Word, the words of all the prophets and the saints of our Lord. Of all the other books you'll find in none salvation knows. If that's just all the Bible in your soul. I went into a home one day to see some friends of mine. Of all the books and magazines, not a Bible could I find. When I asked them for the Bible and they brought it, what a shame. The dust was covered o'er it, not a fingerprint was plain. Dust on the Bible, dust on the Holy Word, the word of all the prophets and the saints of our Lord. Of all the other books you'll find, none salvation knows. That dust on the Bible and your soul. You can read your magazine of love and tragic things, and not one verse of scripture, not one verse do you know. When it is the very truth, and His contents are for you, dust on the Bible will doom your poor soul. Dust on the Bible, dust on the Holy Word, the word of all the prophets and the saints of our Lord. Of all the other books you'll find there's none salvation holds. If that dust off the Bible and in your poor soul. Thank you.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I never know if Johnny tell a lie. He told me he taught her everything she knows.
Johnny Wright, did you teach Kitty Wells everything she knows?
No, I'll tell you what, she taught me a lot.
How many years have y'all been married?
Well, coming up this year, October the 30th, we'll be married 60 years. 60 years. And when I met Kitty, I was born in Mount Juliet, 1914, and lived on a farm. My father farmed all his life, so my sister married and moved into Nashville, and luckily she moved next door to Kitty. And I took my mother and father to visit. My sister one Sunday, and my sister said, "You know what?" Said, "There's a pretty girl lives next door here, and she plays the guitar and sings." And I said, "Well, invite her over." So she invited Kitty over, and that's how we met. And this is 1935. Then Kitty was working at Washington Manufacturing Company, making $9 a week, and I had a job making $13.50 a week, and we married, and we moved into a little old house in Nashville here. I think it's $5 a month what we paid for the rent, and you could buy $3 worth of groceries that last us all the week. Well, I want to tell you one more thing I didn't tell you about when I met Kitty. I told when we met, but I didn't tell how much money that I had. So I asked her to marry me. I had a Model T Ford when I drove to Nashville, and it was only had 4 cylinders, but it was only hitting on 3. So I took Kitty out and I said, "Kitty, how about let's get married?" She says, "Married?" Says, "Well, this is the first date we've had." I said, "Yeah, but I'm in love with you." She said, "Well, how much money do you have?" I said, "Well, I don't have very much money." She said, "Well, you'd have to save up $1,000 before I'd marry you." And I said, $1,000? Me living on a farm, I'd never save that much money. So we dated about a year and a half, and I kept asking her, I said, "Well, now, Kitty, when are we going to get married?" She said, how much money have you saved up? I said, I said, I've saved up $37.50. She said, that's close enough.
We've got a gentleman here. We're talking about record companies. Fred Foster headed up Monument Records here for many, many years. You've worked with a lot of the characters in this room, haven't you, Fred?
My good fortune, I might add.
Well, I imagine you got a few stories on some of them too, don't you?
This is one I can tell because it's a story that I will never forget. This
Tell
night,
one on me.
you know how well insulated recording studios are? You never hear any outside noises to distract you, nothing to spoil your sound. And I've done hundreds of sessions in the studio, never heard one sound from outside. And Billy Walker was on the label, and he came to me one day and said, why don't we do some gospel sessions? I said, yeah, let's do. So George Beverly Shea is a dear friend of mine, and he wrote How Great Thou Art, and sings it, of course, beautifully. And I discovered so does Billy. And we were recording How Great Thou Art, and the take was just magic. It was just one of those that, you know, you can feel it. I'm just praying, oh, Lord, don't let it break down somewhere. And he gets to the line, I hear the rolling thunder. The whole building shook. It was the greatest clap of thunder I have ever heard. It went on tape, right on cue, like it was directed. And Billy looked at me, and I looked at Billy after it was over. Everybody kept playing, thank God. Nobody stopped, and we made a great record there. And I said, well, I guess he's trying to tell us something, Billy.
Didn't you also make some records with Grandpa Jones?
Yes, I did. I want to tell how I first met Grandpa. I was a big fan of his because I loved 8 More Miles to Louisville and all those things. And he was on King Records, you know, for a long time. And I guess maybe the Apollo people learned from Sid Nathan, who owned King, because he never paid anybody either. I went to one record store in Washington, D.C. I was living up there then. And when 8 More Miles to Louisville was a big record, and I said, how many of these copies of this record have you sold? And they said, about 5,000. I doubt if Grandpa ever got paid on 5,000. No telling what he sold nationally. But I was a promotion man for Mercury Records then, and I came down to Nashville, and I wanted to go to the Grand Ole Opry, and most all of you remember Mr. Norris, who kept the back door. And he became a great friend of mine. I loved him. But anyway, he let me in. He didn't know me. I told him who I was and what I did, and he said, well, you just come on in. And Grandpa was wearing makeup in those days. He didn't have his mustache. He had it glued on. And it was in August. It must have been 110. And he was standing backstage in front of the fan, and he was holding his mustache up. And the sweat pouring off of him, and the mustache is trying to blow off, you know. And he said to me, well, I look like a she-buzzard up a crabapple tree in a hailstorm. He says, who are you? And I told him my name. And as I got to know Grandpa, I couldn't wait to go fishing with him because he's telling me all these fishing stories. So I lived out near Old Hickory Lake, and he came out one day, and he's dragging this little boat along, an aluminum boat with about a 7.5 horse motor on it. We get in the lake, and he says, I know where they are. Well, I know where they are. So we head down the lake, putt along, and all of a sudden he cuts the motor. And I said, what do we do? He said, we got to sneak in there in this cove. So he gets his oar, and he puts it in the water and just barely pulls it, you know, making no noise. And boy, my adrenaline is starting to pump, you know, and he says, over there by that log is the bass of the year. I'm going to let you make the first cast. I said, oh, gosh, man, well, let me put this by that log, you know. And I was so charged up, I threw it all the way up in a tree. And Grandpa says, no, and he starts beating the oar on the boat. He says, you've ruined everything. He said, I know you can squirrel hunt, but we're fishing.
Did you make that great record with him of T for Texas where he starts laughing before it's over?
Yes, I did.
What was the story on that?
Grandpa, we wanted to do some Jimmy Rogers things, and he can sing those really well. And Ray Eddington was playing the acoustic guitar on those sessions, and he was playing it so great, and everybody was all excited. And Grandpa broke on the yodel at the end, and he thought we were going to take it over, so he started laughing. But everybody kept playing, and then just sort of ended it, you know. I said, Grandpa, that's so spontaneous and so wonderful, let's just leave it. And he said, well, all right. So we did, and it was a top 10 record, and we got many, many comments on that. And some of the greatest experiences I've ever had in the studio have been with Grandpa, because it's a thrill always to work with an original, and he's an original.
Was it your session when the drummer showed up and asked Grandpa if he wanted drums on the record?
I don't know.
What'd you tell him, Grandpa?
Prince Albert show.
Huh?
Prince Albert radio show with Jack Staff.
Oh, that's right.
Let him tell you.
What did you say to him, Grandpa, when they asked you if you wanted drums to play along with you?
Very little, if any.
Bill, on the old Prince Albert shows, we used to go up and rehearse every Saturday. And if anybody, Grandpa was on pretty regular, if anybody had to cut their songs, it was Grandpa. They'd say, Grandpa, can you cut a little bit of your song?
Make it shorter, you mean?
Yeah, make it shorter, you know. So he walked up there one Saturday, we was rehearsing, and he just said, twang, and he hit his banjo and said, is that short enough?
A little irritated. Back when I worked for the Wilburn Brothers, one of my jobs was to book the guest on a TV show. And I would have to have it done by like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because they had that little card where they put their name on it, take it out of the mailbox. I called Grandpa's house one morning to see if he'd do the TV show that night. Eloise, his daughter, answered the phone. I said, Grandpa there? And she said, no, he's not here. What do you need? I said, well, I need him to do the TV show tonight. She said, oh, well, he'll be glad to. He's gone fishing, but he'll be back in time, and he'll do it. I said, okay. Well, about 4 o'clock, I got a phone call. It was Grandpa. And he said, what did you want? I said, well, I told Eloise I want you to do a TV show tonight. Well, I can't do it. I said, well, Grandpa, she told me you would. He said, then let her do it.
Tennessee Ernie Ford came down one time and replaced Red Foley on the Prince Albert portion of the Grand Ole Opry for 7 or 8 weeks. And he stayed with me when he was here. And I would drive him around to different places with rehearsals, and his spare time was taken up entirely of following Grandpa around and writing down everything that he said. He said, where's Grandpa? Find him. And so he'd just follow him around. And if he said, nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, Ernie would write it down, you know. So I was down at the Opry one night sometime after that, and Ernie had gone home to California, gotten his television show, and was one of the top-rated primetime television shows in America. So I saw Paul backstage at the Opry, and I said, Paul, have you been to California lately? He says, no, but I understand my act is doing quite well.
I don't know where y'all getting them.
Who does a Hank Williams song? Somebody do a Hank Williams song. Who sings?
Most of us.
Most everybody does.
We all do. What's one we can all do?
I saw the light.
I saw the light. I saw the light. What key?
Got G.
Got G.
I wonder.
Yeah. Okay.
I wandered so aimless, I filled with sin. I wouldn't let my dear Savior in. Then Jesus came like a stranger in the night. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the wander astray. Straight is the gate and narrow is the way. How I have traded wrong for the right. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light. I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light.
Just like a blind man, I wandered alone. Worries and troubles I claim for my own. Like a blind man, God gave back his sight. Praise the Lord, I saw the light.
I saw the light. I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. Praise the Lord, I saw the
If you've ever had a dream come true, then you know exactly how I feel right now. I dreamed of 2 days with some of the pioneers of country music. 2 days to sing their signature songs. 2 days to tell stories on each other. 2 days to laugh together. 2 days to remember. 2 days to reminisce about the golden days of country music. The days when your favorite stars loaded into station wagons to make that trek across the country to play for you, their fans. Sometimes they'd be at the high school gym, sometimes at the National Guard Armory or the fairground, but they would always come and they would always entertain. Today, you've seen a part of that dream. This is one of a 4-volume set. I hope you've had the opportunity to see them all. I also would love to hear your comments. My address is on the back of the video box, but if you'll grab something to write with, I'll give it to you while we're wrapping this up. It's Larry Black, The Caleb Group. Post Office Box 210483, Nashville, Tennessee 37221. Let me know if you think we should do some more of these. Let me know if you enjoyed these pioneers of country music. And if perchance this is your first opportunity to see one of this 4-volume set of Country's Family Reunion, contact me at the address given earlier so I can let you know how to get all 4 volumes. Thanks for joining us.